y'all, welcome back to the channel. It's your favorite realtor, Dr. Yeti, and I am back with yet another video. So today I was inspired to look this video up, and I'm talking about rent control. I am working with a client right now who's looking to buy, but a lot of those properties in that city alone, not even in the neighborhood, in that city, they're owned by LLCs, they're owned by corporations, and now a lot of those properties are on the market, and they are very strict and just like not willing to negotiate too much on pricing. And I was like, interesting, why is it that there are so many properties that, like, all of these properties were for rent at some point and now they're for sale? And I was like, it has to be a lot of rent control happening in these neighborhoods. So I was like, let me talk about rent control. Let me look into rent control. And I'm going to be reacting to this CNBC video from 2 years ago. So the data may not be 2025 data. However, I do think it's still knowledgeable or great information for us to gain some knowledge on things about rent control. This is my first time watching this, so I'm gonna be learning with y'all, okay? But anyway, y'all, let's get to the video.
In December 2022, $1,981 was the typical monthly rent in the United States, a 7.4% increase from the year prior. The COVID pandemic, along with record-breaking inflation, drove up rent prices in America to unprecedented levels.
As the pandemic was alleviating, people were going back into the housing market, and that created a really significant pressure on supply. In terms of what's happening right now, we are already seeing those prices falling, and they're falling at a fairly rapid rate.
Rents are going down now.
Before they keep going, let me give you a preface. Some information about the housing market back then. So during 2020 C19 season, there wasn't much movement in housing sales because a lot of people were afraid for their lives, and so many people were not selling as much as they could. Not that many people were leaving their houses. Don't get me wrong, sales were happening, purchase and sales were happening, but it wasn't as much as the prior years. And so because of the whole C19, the pressure to sell homes, to move the housing market increased. And so they reduced interest rates significantly. Interest rates were the lowest it has ever been, ever. And so seeing people with a 2.5% interest rate in 2021, a lot of people were entering into the housing market, right? So a lot of people were jumping into the housing market. And when you have a lot of people jumping into the housing market flips. One, because there was a lot of inventory. A lot of people were willing to sell, but at that time, a lot of people weren't willing to buy. It was just too much going on with the world, with the economy. So people weren't too encouraged to buy a house. Fast forward, after the pandemic happened, 2022 came by, and a lot of buyers were thinking that it was still going to be the same, that they were still going to be able to enter into the housing market and still be able to buy a house with a low interest rate. However, interest rates started to creep up. So interest rates were upwards 5-6% around 2022. And so when people entered into the housing market to purchase a house, now, not only are a lot of buyers entering into the housing market, so were interest rates. So now with that combination, you see a lot of sellers willing to you see a lot of competition with the buyers. And so now it's a lot of buyers in the market trying to buy a house. A lot of people were paying over asking. There was less inventory. And so because of that, the housing market flipped from a buyer's market into a seller's market. And from a buyer's market into a seller's market is quick. From a seller's market into a buyer's market is not as quick. But from a buyer's to a seller's market, it is quick. Why? Because once more people want to buy a house than there are people that want to sell. So the people that want to buy a house, they find out that the interest rates are low and there are a lot of homes on the market. They immediately use that as an opportunity to jump into the market. Also, home prices were not as high. Now, if we're talking about rent, now because there are so many properties around 2022 time, because home prices were going up, right? Competition for buying houses was higher, right? People were paying over asking. Because of that, rent prices started going down, right? Rent prices are going down. Rent prices are going down prior to that. When people were entering to the housing market to buy, it was a lot less renters, a lot more buyers. Rent prices started going down. However, after home prices started going up, right? Rent prices started to creep up as well. Rent prices started to creep up. But let's keep watching. Let me see if they agree with what I'm saying.
In 2022, with 4 straight months of rent cuts, and then in January, rents were flat for the first time since the Great Financial Crisis.
But while rent has begun to stabilize nationwide, rent affordability still remains difficult for many Americans.
All you need is one illness. All you need is one pandemic to make your life more difficult.
There's literally nowhere in the country where a tenant is not burdened by their rent.
More than 19 million renters in America are rent burdened, spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. Evictions are also climbing rapidly with the end of COVID-era protections. There have been more than 2 million evictions since March of 2020 in the just 10 states and 34 cities tracked by the Eviction Lab. In response, support for rent control policies has gained traction.
We've already seen rent control being implemented in California, Oregon, in cities like Washington, D.C., and New York City, as well as St. Paul in Minnesota. So I would say it's definitely making a comeback.
So can policy make rent more affordable in the United States? And if so, what would those policies be? Rent regulation refers to laws that limit rental prices in cities or states. Generally, it comes in two types: rent control and rent stabilization.
To me, they're basically the same for this kind of modern generation of rent control laws. I think in New York City, they do make a distinction between rent control and rent stabilization. That's basically because there is a very old housing stock that are built before the war, essentially, 1947. Those are under true rent control, meaning that they fix the level of rent. But then the modern wave of rent control policies typically allows more flexibility in the amount of rent increases. In California, the annual allowable increase in rents is about 5%, plus the changes in local consumer price indices, or 10%, whichever is lower.
Today, just 7 states, California, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, and Oregon, and District of Columbia have some form of rent control at the state or local level. Experts say that rent control policies that specifically target low-income tenants could be beneficial.
When I talk about targeted rent control, I'm really speaking about affordable housing programs like the low-income housing tax credit, where low-income households can qualify to live in a quality rental property at a well below market rent. And those rents are set based on income year after year. And so it's a very positive program because you're directing the aid specifically to those who need it.
Tenants living.
I'll be very honest with you. I'm not sure if that's how it is all over. However, I do know that Section 8, aka the housing voucher program, no longer, at least I don't want to say no longer, since I've been an agent, right? And since I've been working with Section 8 clients, you don't necessarily have to be in a low income household to qualify for Section 8. You can rent a Section 8 house that is a single family house in a very nice gated neighborhood. You can be a Section 8 tenant in those types of neighborhoods. So I would never, I feel like that's kind of misinformation. Just because you're a voucher participant doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in a low income neighborhood. You can be in a very, very well established high income neighborhood, even if you are on a housing voucher program.
With rent stabilization, say it plays a big role in their financial stability. Talia DaCosta, a New York City tenant living in a rent-stabilized apartment, has experienced what it's like firsthand.
The problem with working in the entertainment field is that you don't know when your next gig is coming. When COVID happened, I had no idea where rent was coming from. Luckily, we had a lot of programs to help out with that, but I was still down $60,000 to $75,000. Once I learned the laws with rent stabilization, like, it's a totally different ballgame. They protect us, they have to treat our apartment better. So I feel really sorry for people who don't live in a rent stabilized apartment because you have no idea if your rent's gonna go up $500.
Rent control could help boost a sense of community by preventing unfair displacement and gentrification.
This is where my grandmother bought a house in 1958. This is where my mom moved at 15 and went to high school up this street. Rent stabilization keeps diversity. A socioeconomic mix is why I live here. There are people on welfare. There are $4 million homes right on this street that I was born on.
Listen, I have a friend whose parents have an apartment that they don't live in, but that apartment is like $1,500 a month in Manhattan because they were grandfathered into that monthly payment. Imagine living in a 3-bedroom apartment in Manhattan and you're only paying $1,500. I was like, girl, that is a steal. And of course, it's they have a whole restriction because even though her parents no longer live there, there's a restriction because she can't rent out the apartment. Like she can't be like, oh, you know, I'm gonna go ahead and rent out this apartment to somebody else. She's gonna have to stick with that apartment for ever if she wants to keep that price. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you, I will stay there. I will find in Manhattan. Oh brother, 1,500? No, was it Manhattan? I think it was Brooklyn. But Brooklyn, Manhattan, they're close to each other. I think it was Brooklyn. I'm not really, but it was close to Manhattan. Let's just say it was literally one metro stop away from Manhattan.
I don't like the homogenized neighborhoods that plague New York. That's not New York.
This isn't the first time that rent control policies have gained widespread support.
This week, we're hosting a free trading and investing workshop.
After the massive economic disruption caused by World War II, the federal government once imposed rent control on roughly 80% of rental housing between 1941 and 1964. But over time, it was abandoned because prominent economists unanimously argued against the policy. That sentiment mostly continues today.
There's various surveys of economists. One done by IMG showed that only 2% thought that rent controls in places like New York and San Francisco were having a positive impact on affordable housing. There's been other studies showing that the removal of rent control has actually had a positive impact on communities.
Economists argue that rent control would deter developers from building more houses.
It should.
Which would only worsen.
Do you know how tight New York is? Like, they need to expand further out. Instead, they're building taller buildings and stacking people on top of each other. And if the buildings that are older are still stable, why destroy them to build a bigger? I don't understand. I would like to get into the heads of those people who don't agree that rent stabilization in cities like New York is beneficial to community.
In the housing supply crisis in the United States. America already suffers from a deficit of 3.8 million homes, especially at low-income price points, according to...
This was made 2 years ago, so maybe I can't speak on it. But inventory on homes in Georgia alone, maybe not New York. Maybe New York is not the best example. But inventory of homes in the U.S. is high. It's going up. So let's buy up all the houses first before we start to say, oh, you know, we are at a housing deficit. This ain't Tokyo or Dubai. This is America. You know how many properties are on the market? There are a lot of properties on the market. Don't let the news fool you. Do not let the news fool you. Georgia, Atlanta metro area alone has 7 months of inventory. The highest it's been in 5 years. Let's be for real.
Habitat for Humanity.
We have not invested as a nation in building a supply of housing in a variety of communities and a variety of different price points. We've instead relied on the private sector to do so. And the private sector has the expertise to leverage that capital and the expertise and the know-how to build those units. But unless that money comes into the market and investors see that as a better investment than some other kind of equity or some other kind of investment, they're not going to come.
Preventing healthy turnover in the housing market could also hurt marginalized communities.
If there's a rent stabilization program in place, you're really incentivizing the renter that's in that unit today not to move.
Yes.
And what does that mean for renters that want to be in that neighborhood or want to access to housing?
They just gonna have to...
They're shut out because that private market capital isn't available.
Nah, brother. Nah. I'm sorry. That's how gentrification works. Don't you see? They make the price of the homes too high. Now everyone is being pushed out. But now this is the opposite of gentrification. People have the incentive to stay. They don't have a reason to leave. And if they really want to leave, they will. So I don't know. You know, the people that want to move there, you know, they just got to find somewhere else to live. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but imagine a $1,500 a month apartment in Brooklyn / Manhattan. Come on.
Available to build additional units. And who's the most growing segment of our population? It's people of color. Not only are we not doing anything to help them, we're actually hurting them by interfering with that what would otherwise be general healthy turnover in the rent.
I don't think I may be wrong, but I don't think she is the best representative to help us advocate for whether or not it's beneficial to the people of color. I don't think that, like, I just don't understand. I could be wrong. If there's anyone watching from New York, watching this channel, watching this video, let me know. Are there any people of color that are complaining about finding housing? I want to know, because I haven't heard of it. Okay, I haven't heard of it. I'm talking about rental housing, not purchase housing. I'm talking about rental housing. Has there anyone been complaining about that? So I don't know where she got her information from. Maybe data wise, on paper, what she's saying makes sense. However, I ain't gonna hold you. I don't think I've seen any black or colored person complaining about not being able to find rental housing in New York. But like I said, I'm not from New York. I don't live in New York. So maybe somebody else can speak for that.
Our research have shown that in the longer run, it actually leads to a overall reduction of affordable rental housing supply. It actually fuels gentrification and increases the income inequality. Our study do find evidence that are consistent with landlords trying very hard and trying actively to get out of rent control over the longer run by substituting their rental units to other.
And I can imagine that. Now, in terms of a landlord's perspective, I can see how that's damaging for them, because now they can't increase rent, but their property taxes are most likely going to keep going up. I mean, you are in New York, so your property taxes are not going to stay the same. These people are stuck with this rent, but you can't do anything about it because, you know, this is the law. You can't increase the rent, though you have an increase in property taxes. So that's very unfortunate for landlords. I can see how that's not the best for landlords.
Types of housing that overall better cater towards higher income residents.
So since I've lived here so long, and there were people who had lived here for decades, I knew that they were trying to get me out. Mm-hmm. I knew that they wanted to get rent stabilized people out so that they could do renovations and hike up the rent. My apartment was falling apart. I had black mold. Then I had paint falling down. I found lead paint. My super does not listen to me. I knew exactly what they were doing.
Of course.
It was ignoring me. It was telling me I'm the only person that has any problem out of all of their buildings. All it said to me is that you want me out of this apartment so that you can raise the rent $1,000.
Right.
That's what they wanted.
And didn't you say that there are laws that say that they have to fix things? Isn't that what she said? It's not. Then she said that there. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Didn't she say that there are laws that show that they're gonna have to fix things? Because think about it, there's gonna be a lot of pushback and resentment towards the tenants who are in rent stabilized apartments by the landlords, because the landlords want them out. So if there are no laws protecting the tenants, then landlords can do exactly what this person is doing, which is kind of messed up, actually, when I think about it.
They deny these allegations and have addressed every issue in DaCosta's apartment. Perhaps the biggest flaw of rent control policies is that it may only be a short-term solution.
Housing has always been a bipartisan issue. It is a basic human need. And so people on the right and on the left have supported various housing policy initiatives to create more housing. Unfortunately, we're in an environment now where politicians are looking for expedient short-term solutions to respond to concerns that their constituents raise. And rent control appears to be a very expedient solution, but it is a lot more complicated and in fact hurts the very folks that it purports to help.
In January 2023, several progressive Democrats urged the federal government to take action against soaring rent prices. They suggested the Federal Housing Finance Agency to establish renter protections for individuals residing in properties financed with government-backed mortgage properties, including anti-price gouging protections and just cause eviction standards. They also requested the Federal Trade Commission to issue new regulations, defining excessive rent increases as a practice that unfairly affects commerce.
That is going to be challenging, given that response and feedback we've already seen at a more local level, such as at the state level.
But there are still other solutions beside rent control that could help alleviate the rent hikes across America. The first and most important step is to build more affordable housing to go around.
That's the role of the government. The federal government is to build more government-owned affordable housing, because that's really what's missing.
It doesn't have to be government-owned.
That the private market cannot fill the gap that is created by the fact that we have so many people living on minimum wage.
Tax incentives could not only boost new construction of affordable rental housing, but also provide a reason for landlords to keep rent prices low.
There are opportunities at the state and local level to provide tax abatement, real estate tax abatement, for owners that are willing to provide housing and limit rents for a certain period of time for a certain number of units. We've seen those happen in a number of states, and those can be successful strategies.
Until supply catches up with demand, certain governmental programs can help fill the gap.
We really need to expand housing vouchers. We're seeing long waiting lists all across the country.
Well, we're in 2025, and our president is actually trying to stop housing voucher programs. They're trying to stop welfare. So anything government assistance-wise, food, housing, like whatever, they are trying to stop that. So unfortunately, I mean, like I said, this was 2 years ago, but before they even keep talking, here's what I think. Okay, I've worked with people looking to buy or looking to rent with the housing voucher programs. There are not that much properties out there for these people. There are people looking to just buy a single, or not rent a single family house for them and their kids. And it's not that many of them out there. Townhomes, not that many of them out there. Apartments. I have worked really hard to help these people find what they're looking for. And unfortunately, it's just not as simple as it seems. And I do think that the government needs to push out more incentives for people to start purchasing properties, building properties just for the voucher program. And then they get incentivized that way. However, with the threat of it being shut down, it may not happen. It may not occur.
In Los Angeles, for instance, they recently reopened their waiting list for the first time in 5 years. They were expecting something like 365,000 applicants, but only had 30,000 spots.
We're at a sort of inflection point where more investment.
Even with the homeless population, I serve with the homeless population sometimes. There are people that are homeless right now that have been looking for housing, and they have properties for the homeless that they house the homeless in. However, there is a waiting list for all of those properties, and those people have to wait. They have to wait and I'm talking waiting list is pages long. People have been waiting for years to find housing. So it's not even just the housing voucher program, it's also the homeless population. Atlanta has a very high homeless population, and the worst part is the government is pushing them out. I don't know where these people are going. Like the places that I go to serve them, they're no longer there because they threaten to arrest them. A lot of them have been arrested. They lose their stuff, they lose their ID. Once they get arrested, all the stuff that they have on the streets, there are other homeless people that just come and steal from them and take them up and snatch them up. So if the homeless population is also a thing. Now, maybe this is not what this video is about, but I will say that if let's just keep going.
And on that side would certainly, I believe, help the folks at the lowest end of the income ladder, and that would help push prices down.
Policy, backed by proper research, can lessen the burden for more than a third of Americans that pay rent across the country.
It's so important to bifurcate between where the challenges are and where they aren't. Everybody looks at rental housing as one big bucket, but it's a diverse, large group of people from different income levels, different walks of life. And it's so important not to talk about renters as one big group, but really focus on the renters who are most in need. And I think that the more we can focus our conversations and our policy on renters in need, and the more targeted we are of our solutions, I think the more effective we'll be in solving for it.
Yeah, I mean, let me know what you guys think, honestly, about the whole rent control situation. Do you think gentrification is better than rent control? Do you think that we should be increasing the rent stabilization is good, or do you think it's bad for communities? You know, I've already spoken on my opinion about it, but what are your thoughts? Do you think it's a good idea to stabilize the rent for people who are especially low income, or do you think that it's preventing people from who are looking for housing, is preventing them from actually finding housing themselves? Let me know what you think about this in the comments, and I'm very curious to know, comment, and I always respond to my comments. So anyway, make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.